could fill that.
Yeah, you could fill that. I'd just like to introduce to you Lorraine McNeil. She is the faculty anthropology professor here at the college. And as an introduction to anthropology, if you have questions or if you have interesting ideas that you want to explore further outside of the realms of this course, this is the person that you want to see. So welcome to Lorraine. Here we go.
Thank you, everybody. I thought I would talk about a way in which anthropology can actually be put to practical use in the world today, particularly some of the really serious issues that the world is facing today, like human rights abuses, environmental devastation, lack of democracy and social justice, and often those all come together, and the peoples that they often impact the most are very frequently Indigenous peoples, who are often peoples that anthropologists work with and get to know and care about. So the example that I want to talk about today is Canadian mining corporations. Canadian mining corporations are a very serious and growing problem worldwide because more than 3/4 of all the world's largest mining corporations are headquartered in Canada. And the reason for that is we have the laxest laws in any developed country, which is to say none at all, regarding regulating the activities of mining corporations overseas. Many of them are in fact American corporations who choose to be registered on the Vancouver or Toronto Stock Exchange so that they can be officially considered Canadian, because even the US has stricter regulations. The official position of the Canadian government is that they expect their mining corporations and all corporations to follow the laws of their own countries. But in many of these countries, due to pressure from organizations like the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, the mining companies have actually written the laws, and so of course they write laws only in their own interests. And in many countries as well, there really is no rule of law or working justice system as we would remotely understand it in Canada. So the case I want to particularly focus on is a Canadian mining corporation called Goldcorp, which is active in many countries, but I want to talk about particularly their actions in Guatemala. Guatemala is a country that had 30 years of military dictatorship, one military ruler after another, and the return to democracy has been at best a bumpy, rocky road. And in fact, the current president is believed to have been associated, when he was a colonel, with some serious crimes against humanity himself. So it's widely recognized that there is no rule of law or justice system that works in Guatemala. Over half the population of Guatemala are Indigenous, Mayan peoples, and many of the mining corporations are wanting to explore and build mines on Mayan land. And even though Guatemala is a signatory to, it's an international convention called ILO 169, which stipulates that if any development is happening on Indigenous lands, Indigenous people have to be consulted. They either haven't been consulted, or when they've been consulted and say they don't want mines, their decisions are ignored. One famous example is in a municipality called Sipacapa, where there are 13 different sort of small little villages, and they insisted on having the consultation, and 11 of the 13 municipalities voted almost unanimously against the mine. One abstained and one voted in favor. So that's pretty overwhelmingly that the people did not want the mine, and the mine was built anyway. The mine has had horrific health effects on people and their animals, which is an important source of their livelihood. Explosions at the mine have cracked the walls of their houses, and the mine's response has been to say that people were playing gospel music too loud, or it was their corn grinders, which they've used for centuries. Just sort of quite ridiculous kind of response to them. As I say, the health impacts, the impacts on the environment, on the watersheds are horrific. So the summer before last, because they can't get any justice through the regular legal system, a group of people organized a tribunal, which is becoming increasingly common in places where there's no real rule of law. It's sort of like an alternative rule of law. And for the Mayan people, it was the first time they got to speak before an international panel of 12 judges and actually be heard and had their story told. And the panel drew on, there were environmental scientists, there were doctors who could relate to the health effects. There were also two anthropologists who spoke about the impact on culture and how the culture and their social life had been drastically affected by the mines. For instance, families being broken up when you have maybe one son, a young man who's working in the mine, and so he wants the mine, and the rest of the family who's opposed to the mine and wants to retain their traditional way of life. There's also been a huge, massive increase in drinking. There's been an increase in domestic violence, which was virtually non-existent before. There's been an advent of prostitution and sexually transmitted diseases, which never existed in these communities before. So the cultural impact has been huge. So it's really important that two of the 12 people that heard the stories of what's happening to the mine people were anthropologists. So what did they do with that? They produced a very, very detailed report, and then the report, there have been a lot of attempts to get that report to Canadian government officials who really have not been interested in hearing it or responding to it. Certainly we've had a very different response from the official opposition, who are very concerned, but in terms of at the highest levels of the Canadian government, or even at the local levels of our MPs, they just don't want to know, because they don't want to be in a position of having to intervene and take action against their mining corporations. So it's a really, really difficult and challenging struggle, but it's a very important struggle. It's one that anthropologists who know the Mayan people feel very, very passionate about. It's about their rights, it's about their culture, it's about their heritage, it's about their lands, it's about their water, it's about their animals. Everything comes together in an integrated whole, as we talk about in anthropology. And so that's one example of how important bringing an anthropological perspective to the table is, and the work we do and the advocacy that we do in solidarity with the peoples that we live with. Thank you.
Oh, Lorraine, thanks so much, because it makes such a difference to understand that your field has practical application,
Yeah.
and especially for youth, because and I think even to have a voice, because we're all, we're in these classrooms, and how do you start to make your voice heard, or how do you start to make a difference in writing campaigns?
If I had more time, I would have talked about the Hudbay case, but it's a different company, and I didn't know if you had time for me to talk about that.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Do you think you have time, or?
Not at this moment.
Okay.